I'm Rishvini, and today our group will be presenting about the Volkswagen emission scandal. Starting with the objectives of the presentation, this presentation aims to understand the background of Volkswagen company and its rise as one of the largest automobile manufacturers. It'll explain the emission scandal, focusing on how they used defeat device software to cheat emissions tests by reducing emissions only during laboratory testing while allowing higher emissions in real driving conditions. The presentation will also examine the ethical, legal, environmental, and financial impacts of the scandal, including loss of trust, legal penalties, environmental harm, and major financial losses. Finally, to evaluate Volkswagen's response to the crisis and highlight key lessons in corporate governance, accountability, and business ethics. So, I will be introducing Volkswagen AG. This was founded in 1937 in Germany and is now one of the largest automobile manufacturers in the world. Its headquarters is located in Wolfsburg, Germany, and this company produces a wide range of products including passenger cars, commercial vehicles, motorcycles, and mobility services. This makes it a key player in the global automobile industry. It is also known for its strong portfolio of brands that includes Audi, Porsche, and Bentley. So together these brands allow Volkswagen AG to serve different markets from everyday vehicles to luxury and performance segments. Coming to the history of Volkswagen AG, this was, like I said, founded in 1937 by the German Labor Front. The name Volkswagen itself means people's car, reflecting its original goal of producing affordable vehicles for the general public. One of its most iconic models, the Volkswagen Beetle, became one of the best selling cars in automobile history. After World War II, it resumed production and expanded rapidly into international markets, strengthening its global presence. Over time, the company acquired several major automobile brands, growing into one of the largest automobile groups in the world. Today, it operates in over 150 countries and is heavily investing in electric vehicles, digital technologies, and sustainable mobility for the future. Now, coming to its role in the global automobile industry. So, it plays a major role in both Germany's economy and the global automobile industry. In Germany, it's one of the largest employers and a key contributor to the national GDP and export revenue. The company is seen as a symbol of German engineering strength, quality, and manufacturing excellence. On a global scale, it operates in over 150 countries and produces millions of vehicles each year, making it one of the largest car manufacturers in the world. The company continues to expand its future focused strategies, investing heavily in electronic mobility, autonomous driving technologies, and sustainable transportation solutions.
Okay, my name is Varsha and I'll be presenting the background of the emission issue related to Volkswagen emission scandal. Vehicles release different gases and particles into the environment during fuel combustion. These substances known as vehicle emissions. Some common pollutants include carbon monoxide or CO, uh, nitrogen oxides known as NOx, hydrocarbons, particulate matter, and carbon dioxide. Excessive vehicle emission can negatively affect both human health and the environment. Because of these effects, governments introduce regulations and emission standards to control the amount of pollutants released by vehicles. So, what are vehicle emissions? Vehicle emissions refer to gases and particles released from a vehicle's exhaust system during the combustion process in the engine. So, different pollutants have different effects. So, nitrogen oxide, or also known as NOx, contributes to air pollution and can cause respiratory problems. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. Carbon monoxide is a toxic gas that can reduce oxygen transport in the body. And lastly, particulate matter consists of tiny particles that can enter the lungs and affect the health. In the Volkswagen scandal, nitrogen oxide or NOx was the main concern because the diesel vehicles release much more higher levels during actual driving conditions. Moving on to diesel engines and emission standards. So, diesel engines became very popular because they offer several advantages. They provide better fuel efficiency, lower carbon dioxide emissions, and also good engine performance. However, diesel engines also have disadvantages to them. They tend to produce higher levels of nitrogen oxides and particulate matter compared to petrol engines. Therefore, additional technologies are needed to reduce this emission. To control pollution, government establish emission standards. These standards set the maximum limit for pollutants that vehicles can release. Example include Euro emission standards in Europe and EPA standards in United States. So now I'll be talking about environmental regulations in Europe and US. Environmental regulation were developed to reduce pollution and to protect the public health. So in Europe, vehicle emissions are controlled using Euro emission standards, which are progressively becoming stricter from Euro 1 to Euro 6, especially for nitrogen oxide and particulate emission. However, in the United States, the regulations are controlled by Environmental Protection Agency, or also known as the EPA, which applies strict testing procedures and imposes penalties for violation. These strict regulations created pressure for manufacturers such as Volkswagen to meet emission standards, and this eventually contributes to emission scandal. That's all for me. Now I'll pass it to the next person. Thank you.
Now I'll explain the timeline of the Volkswagen emission scandal, also known as Dieselgate. The story began in 2006 when Volkswagen introduced its clean diesel strategy. The company wanted to promote diesel vehicles as being environmentally friendly while also offering a good performance. Between the years 2000 to 2008, Volkswagen engineers developed a software known as defect device. This software was designed to detect a vehicle was undergoing an official emission test. However, temporarily it reduced the harmful emissions. However, during a normal driving conditions, the vehicles produced much higher levels of pollution. In 2014, researchers from International Council of Clean Transportation, together with researchers from West Virginia University, discovered that Volkswagen cars emitted a much higher levels of nitrogen oxide during the real-world driving compared to laboratory testing. As a result, in 2015 May, the United States Environment of Protection Agency, or EPA, began questioning about these unusual test results. On 18 of September 2015, the EPA officially issued a notice of violation during the Volkswagen of using illegal software to cheat the emission test. Just a few days later, on 22 September 2015, Volkswagen admitted that it had installed the defect devices in millions of diesel vehicles worldwide. This marked the beginning of one of the biggest corporate scandals in the automotive history. Now we'll be talking about the slide which explains how the scandal went from an investigation to become a global scandal that was uncovered. It all started when the researchers conducted independent tests on the Volkswagen diesel vehicles. They found out that the emissions recorded during the normal road driving were much higher compared to the results obtained during the official laboratory tests. These findings attracted the attention of the US Environmental Protection Agency, known as EPA, and the California Air Resources Board, also known as CARB. Both authorities launched investigations to determine why there is such a large difference between the emissions. During the investigation, Volkswagen was questioned several times. Initially, the company provided different types of explanations, but then the further evidence showed that the special software had been intentionally installed to manipulate the test results. Eventually, Volkswagen admitted to using the defect device software. As a result, these approximately 11 million vehicles worldwide were affected because of this, and because the scale of the scandal was so big, this incident became known internationally as the Dieselgate. Now we look into the major events that happened after the scandal. Following the Volkswagen's admission, the company faced serious consequences. In 2015, the Volkswagen's chief executive officer Martin Winterkorn resigned and accepted responsibility for this crisis. The company also began recalling millions of affected vehicles around the world in an effort to correct the emission issue. In 2016, Volkswagen agreed to pay billions of dollars in fines, settlements, and compensation to customers, government, and regulators. Between the years 2017 to 2020, several Volkswagen executives faced criminal charges and legal action for their involvement in the scandal. In the years following after that, Volkswagen shifted its business strategy by investing heavily into electric vehicles and sustainable technologies to rebuild back their public trust and also improve its corporate image. Overall, the Dieselgate became one of the largest corporate scandals in the automotive history. It demonstrated how unethical business decisions can lead to have serious legal, financial, environmental, and reputational consequences. Now that we look into how the scandal got developed and uncovered, the next presenter will explain how the defect device actually worked and how the Volkswagen manipulated the emission tests.
Now I will explain the technology behind the Volkswagen emission scandal, which is known as the defect device. A defect device is a type of software installed in the vehicle's engine control unit, which is the computer that controls the engine. Its purpose was to detect when the car was undergoing an official emission test. Once the software recognized the test, it automatically activated the car's full emissions control system so the vehicle met the legal pollution limits. However, during normal driving, the software switched back to its normal settings. This reduced the effectiveness of the emission control and allowed the car to release much higher levels of harmful pollutants. In simple terms, the car appeared clean during testing but polluted much more when people drove them on the road. So, how did this software actually work? The defect device continuously monitored different conditions, such as vehicle speed, steering wheel movement, engine operation, and the length of the time the car had been running. When these conditions matched an official laboratory test, the software switched the mode into what we call a test mode. In the test mode, the emissions control system worked at full capacity, reducing nitrogen oxide, so that the vehicle passed the emission test. Once the test ended, the car was driven normally on public roads. The software switched back to normal driving mode. This improved engine performance and fuel efficiency, but it also caused vehicle to produce much higher levels of nitrogen oxide emission than allowed by the law. This table shows the difference between laboratory testing and real-world driving. In a laboratory, the vehicle is tested under controlled conditions. The speed follows a fixed pattern, the steering wheel hardly moves, and the software recognizes that the vehicle is being tested. As a result, emission control system stay fully active, and the car produce low nitrogen oxide emissions. However, during normal driving, road conditions constantly change. The software recognizes that the vehicle is no longer in a test environment and reduces the emission controls. Independent studies later found that some Volkswagen diesel car produced up to 40 times more nitrogen oxide than the legal limit during normal driving. This difference between laboratory result and real-world performance became the key evidence in the Dieselgate scandal. The defect device was illegal because it intentionally deceived both regulators and consumers. Government authorities approved this vehicle because they met emission standard during laboratory testing. Customers also believed that they were buying environmentally friendly, clean diesel vehicles. In reality, the cars released much higher levels of pollution during everyday driving. Around 11 million diesel vehicles worldwide were affected by this software. The defect device was not a technical error or an accident. It was intentionally programmed to cheat emission tests, making it one of the biggest corporate scandals in the automotive industry.
So now I'll be presenting on my part, which is discovery of the Volkswagen emission scandal. So the irony of Dieselgate is that the people who caught Volkswagen weren't actually trying to track that. In 2013, in a tiny non-profit group called the International Council on Clean Transportation, or the ICCT, set out to defend diesel cars. So they noticed that European diesel cars had high emissions on the road, but they believed that cars built for the ultra strict US market will be perfectly clean. They wanted to prove the American Volkswagen were green and use that data to shape European car makers into cleaning up their act. Because the ICCT didn't have their own test labs, they partnered with West Virginia University's Center for Alternative Fuels, Engines and Emissions. A small team of engineers and graduate students operating a tiny university grant took on the fieldwork. They had no idea that they were about to trigger one of the biggest corporate scandals in human history. So up until this point, regulators only tested cars in stationary laboratories, essentially putting the car on a giant treadmill while it was hooked up to sensors. Volkswagen software knew exactly how to cheat that specific test. But the West Virginia team did something different. They used a portable emissions measurement system. They strapped a heavy trunk-mounted laboratory kit directly to the tailpipes of three rented cars: a VW Jetta, a VW Passat, and a BMW X5. Then they drove them for thousands of miles across the real California highways and steep mountain roads. So the results were very terrifying, which is why the Volkswagen passed the indoor laboratory test with flying colors on the open road. The Jetta emitted nitrogen oxide at 50 to 40 times the legal US limit. So the Passat emitted 5 to 20 times the limit. Meanwhile, the BMW X5 passed both tests cleanly, proving the real-world compliance was possible. So in May 2014, the researchers handed the shocking data straight over to the EPA and the California Air Resources Board. So even with the data in hand, it took another 15 months to finally expose Volkswagen. When the EPA first confronted VW in 2014, with Volkswagen company, the company didn't confess. Instead, they played a massive game of corporate stalling. They blamed the data on technical glitches, uncalibrated university equipment, or unusual driving conditions. They even offered a fake voluntary recall in late 2014 to recalibrate the software, but when California regulators tested the recaller's cars back on the road in early 2015, they found the car was still pumping out illegal pollution. The breaking point came in the summer of 2015. Out of patience, the EPA issued a devastating ultimatum. If Volkswagen could not provide a valid scientific explanation for the emission gap, the US government would ban the sale of all 2016 Volkswagen diesel vehicles in America. So, faced with total financial lockdown in the US market, Volkswagen House of Cards collapsed. On September 3rd, 2015, Volkswagen executive finally admitted to regulators that they had hidden a defeat device in the engine software. These lines of code script automatically recognized when a test was happening by tracking steering wheel position, speed, and barometric pressure. During a test, it turned the emissions filters on full blast. On the real road, it switched them off to give the driver back the full economy and engine power while choking the environment. So 2 weeks later, on September 18, the EPA went public with a notice of violation. The secret was out, the stock crashed, and Dieselgate officially became a global scandal. That's all from me. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Maha, and today I will be presenting the ethical issues surrounding Volkswagen, focusing in three main areas: the business ethical violation, corporate responsibility, and honesty and transparency issues. So firstly, the ethical violation. Volkswagen became involved in one of the biggest business ethics scandals in history, also known as the Dieselgate scandal. The company installed illegal software called as the defeat device in its diesel vehicles. This software could detect when the car was being tested for emissions and temporarily reduce the pollution levels. However, during the normal driving, the vehicles release much higher levels of harmful nitrogen oxide gases, up to 40 times the legal limit. Around 100 million vehicles worldwide were affected. This was unethical because Volkswagen deliberately deceived regulators, customers, and the public. So, secondly, the compliance responsibility. The compliance responsibility means that a company should act responsible towards society, communities, employees, customers, and environment. In Volkswagen's case, the company failed to meet this responsibility by putting the profits and the market success ahead of ethical behavior. These excessive emissions contributed to environmental pollution and posed risks to public health. As a result, Volkswagen had to pay billions of dollars in fines, compensations, and recall costs. The company also made changes to strengthen its corporate governance and the compliance systems to prevent similar problems in the future. So lastly, honesty and transparency. So honesty and transparency are essential for building trust with customers and stakeholders. However, Volkswagen advertised its diesel vehicles as environmentally friendly and clean diesel, even though the company knew the emissions were much higher than the legal limit during normal driving. Instead of being transparent, the company canceled the cheating software and essentially denied any wrongdoing. This deception seriously damaged Volkswagen's reputation and reduced customer confidence around the world. The Volkswagen scandal teaches several important ethical lessons. Firstly, companies should never sacrifice ethical for profits. Secondly, honesty and transparency are necessary to maintain customer trust. Thirdly, strong corporate governance and ethical leadership helps prevent misconduct. Finally, businesses must take responsibility for their impact on society and environment. In the long term, ethical behaviors is essential for sustainable business success.
Good day, everyone. I'll be presenting on the impact of the Volkswagen emissions scandal on the environment and public health. Volkswagen diesel vehicles were found to emit significantly higher levels of nitrogen oxide, also known as NO2, than what was officially reported during emissions testing. In fact, studies showed that in real world driving conditions, the emissions were up to 40 times higher than the legal limits. This is very important because it shows a large gap between laboratory testing and actual real life performance. These excessive emissions contributed heavily to air pollution, especially in urban areas where vehicle density is high. As a result, this raised serious environmental and health concerns globally. Nitrogen oxides, or NO2, are gases that are mainly produced from diesel engine combustion. These gases include nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide, and they are one of the major contributors to air pollution and smog formation. When people are exposed to NO2, it affects the respiratory system by causing inflammation and irritation in the airways. In the short term, this can lead to coughing, throat irritation, and difficulty in breathing. It can also worsen existing conditions such as asthma. Over long periods of exposure, NO2 can cause more serious health problems. These include chronic bronchitis, reduced lung function, and an increased risk of cardiovascular diseases such as heart problems. Therefore, NO2 pollution is not just an environmental issue but also a major public health concern. From an environmental perspective, nitrogen oxides have several harmful effects. One of the main issues is that NO2 reacts with sunlight and other pollutants to form ground level ozone, which is a major component of smoke. This significantly reduces air quality, especially in cities with heavy traffic. NO2 also contributes to acid rain, which occurs when these gases mix with water vapor in the atmosphere and fall back to the earth as acidic precipitation. Acid rain can damage forests, reduce crop yields, and harm aquatic ecosystems by changing the chemical balance of soil and water. Overall, this leads to long term environmental degradation, affecting both natural ecosystems and agricultural productivity. In terms of long term health effects, continuous exposure to high levels of nitrogen oxides can lead to serious chronic diseases. This includes cardiovascular diseases such as heart attacks and high blood pressure, as well as long term respiratory illnesses like asthma and chronic bronchitis. Over time, prolonged exposure to polluted air has also been linked to premature deaths. Urban populations are especially affected because they are exposed to higher levels of traffic related pollution on a daily basis. This makes air pollution a significant public health issue in modern cities. The Volkswagen emission scandal highlighted the importance of strict environmental regulations and proper monitoring of real world emissions to protect public health. To conclude, the Volkswagen emission scandal resulted in excessive nitrogen oxide emissions that had serious consequences for both the environment and public health. It contributed to worsening air pollution, increased the risk of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, and caused long term damage to ecosystems and air quality. Overall, this case highlights the importance of strict emission regulations, accurate testing under real world conditions, and corporate responsibility in protecting both people and the environment. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Sara Amoo, and today I will be presenting the economic and legal consequences of the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. I will be covering three main areas: the fines and lawsuits faced by Volkswagen, the financial losses the company suffered, and the legal actions taken against its executives. So, one of the biggest legal consequences of the Dieselgate scandal was the large number of fines and lawsuits against Volkswagen. In 2015, it was discovered that the company had installed an illegal software known as defeat devices in around 11 million diesel vehicles to cheat emissions tests. As a result, Volkswagen faced lawsuits from governments, customers, investors, and environmental regulators in many countries. Overall, the company has paid more than 30 billion euros in fines, legal settlements, and compensations. This shows how serious the legal consequences can be when a company violates environmental laws. Besides the legal consequences, Volkswagen also experienced major financial losses. After the scandal became public, the company's share price fell by nearly 30%, reducing investor confidence and the company's market value. Volkswagen also spent billions of euros on vehicle recall, customer compensations, legal fees, and repairs. These financial losses had a significant impact on the company and encouraged Volkswagen to invest more in electric vehicles and cleaner technology to rebuild public trust. The legal consequences were not limited to Volkswagen as a company. Several executives and employees were investigated and charged for their involvement in the scandal. Former Volkswagen CEO Martin Winterkorn faced charges related to fraud and market manipulation after resigning in 2015. Another important case involved Rupert Stadler, the former CEO of Audi, who became one of the first senior executives to receive a criminal conviction connected to the Dieselgate scandal. In both Germany and United States, court took legal actions against several individuals involved. This shows that the company leaders can be held personally accountable for unethical and illegal decisions. So this concludes my presentation on the economic and legal consequences of Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. Thank you for listening.
In September 2015, Volkswagen was exposed for installing illegal software known as a defeat device in its diesel vehicles. The software could detect when the car was undergoing emissions testing and temporarily reduced emission to pass the test. However, during normal driving, these cars release much higher levels of pollutants, especially nitrogen oxides. Around 11 million diesel vehicles worldwide were affected, making this one of the largest corporate scandals in automotive history. In the United States alone, regulators found that some vehicles emitted up to 40 times more pollution than legally allowed. This scandal severely damaged Volkswagen's global reputation. Customers felt deceived, investors lost confidence, and the company faced major criticism for unethical corporate behavior. As a result, Volkswagen experienced a sharp drop in public trust and had to spend billions on recalls, legal settlements, and compensation. The scandal highlighted the importance of transparency, ethics, and corporate accountability. Germany has long been known for engineering excellence and high quality car manufacturing. Brands like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes Benz, and Audi helped build the strong global reputation of the Made in Germany brand. When Volkswagen's misconduct was revealed, it created doubts about the wider German automotive industry. Consumers and regulators began questioning whether other manufacturers were also fully complying with emission standards. This led to stricter emissions regulation and more rigorous vehicle testing, especially in Europe and the United States. The scandal also accelerated the global shift towards cleaner transportation, including hybrid and electrical vehicles. Dieselgate became a turning point that pushed the automotive industry towards sustainability. After the scandal became public, Volkswagen issued formal apologies and made major leadership changes. CEO Martin Winterkorn resigned shortly after the scandal was exposed. Volkswagen agreed to massive legal settlements and compensation programs. In the United States alone, settlement costs reached up to 14.7 billion US dollars, aimed at compensating customers, reducing pollutions, and supporting environmental initiatives. To restore its image, Volkswagen shifted its strategy heavily towards electric vehicles, sustainability, and cleaner mobility solutions. Models like Volkswagen ID4 and ID Bus represent this transition. Overall, this scandal serves as a reminder that short term gains through dishonesty can lead to long term damage to reputation, finance, and public trust.
Hello, I'm Yeashrinaa. So I will be presenting about the key lessons learned from this Volkswagen scandal and preventive measures can be taken for a company and finally the conclusion of this report. So firstly, let's look at the lessons learned from the Volkswagen scandal. First, we have reputation over profit. Reputation must always come before profit because as a Volkswagen spent decades building a global legacy of reliability and engineering excellence, yet they traded all of that hard earned consumers' trust away in a matter of days just to chase short term market dominance and sales metrics. Second, we see the absolute danger of a toxic corporate culture. Ambition is fine, but when an organization becomes hyper centralized and leadership rules through intimidation, it builds a terrifying wall of silence. Employees at Volkswagen didn't hide technical realities because they wanted to be malicious. They did it out of self preservation because the culture forced compliance through fear rather than letting engineers innovate honestly to solve problems. Third, we have compliance is completely non negotiable because legal and environmental regulations must be treated as fundamental moral responsibilities, not optional roadblocks to bypass. Continuing on the lesson learned, next would be the cost of misconduct is mathematically catastrophic. Ethical shortcuts are terrible financial strategies. Deception on this scale resulted in massive liabilities with Volkswagen total bill exceeding 32 billion euros across global fines, vehicle recalls and massive legal settlements. Next, we have the multi-stakeholder domino effect. Corporate crises never happen in a vacuum. A single ethical failure ripples outward, simultaneously damaging green conscious customers, devastating employee morale, destroying shareholder wealth, and inflicting severe damage on the broader society. Finally, we have the fundamental failure of internal governance. Volkswagen's dual board system lacked robust internal checks and balances because they had a weak whistleblower protection and a passive board oversight. Senior executive operated with impunity, allowing a massive technical fraud to continue completing undetected for years. Moving on to the next, which is preventive measures for the company. So, what preventive measures must a corporation implement to ensure a crisis like this never happens again? So, firstly, a company must promote ethical leadership and culture. This means moving away from aggressive performance metrics and instead of cultivating an open environment where employees feel psychologically safe to flag unrealistic targets. Secondly, we have to strengthen internal controls. This means modernizing risk management to include regular internal compliance, audits, and independent oversight so technical deviations are caught early. Third, we must aggressively protect whistleblowing channels. Organizations need secure, fully confidential reporting systems. If an engineer spots an unethical shortcut or a software workaround, they must be able to report it directly to the independent committees without fearing executive retaliation. Fourth, we need to enhance board oversights. Board of directors can no longer sit back and stare at financial growth charts. They must be mandated to actively monitor operational and engineering processes, breaking the echo chambers that executive team often builds. Finally, the business model must permanently invest in sustainable innovations. True longevity means shifting long-term strategies towards fully transparent, genuinely clean technologies like electric mobility, removing the temptation to greenwash old systems. And finally, to conclude this presentation, the Dieselgate scandal stands as a landmark lesson in modern corporate failure. It is ultimate proof that pursuing a competitive edge through unethical shortcuts is a direct path to a total financial, legal, and reputational damage. The global consequences of Volkswagen's choice went far beyond the corporate boardroom. They caused a real world environmental degradation, including acid rain, aquatic dead zones, resulting in thousands of premature public health deaths, and triggered an ultimate collapse of global stakeholders' trust in the automotive industry. So ultimately, our report proves that foundation of sustainable success cannot rely on greenwashing or empty public relations campaigns. Long-term business survival strictly requires embedding integrity, transparency, accountability into every single level of corporate decision making. As the automotive industry shifts permanently towards cleaner, electrical technologies, Volkswagen serves as the permanent lasting warning because technology innovation is meaningless unless it is anchored by absolute legal compliance and unwavering moral responsibility. Thank you.